And here I'm back. So what I was saying is that for the explicit learning in the explicit learning experience for the approach to learning skill that you want to develop, it doesn't have to be within mathematics. We are just trying to understand that we want to put things in order and that it makes more sense. It's logical. But then in the implicit activity, I want the students to say, well, I understand now that I have to put a story in order, and then I want the students to transfer that skill in their lines of reasoning in order to present a well-structured communication. So this is something that I expect from the students. But the difference here, and you can see it right beside it, is that these activities, it's not only to do the activities, they will require feedback from my part. So in the formative assessment activity from my part or perhaps their peers. So for that, one of the things that I might ask is for peer assessment, I want perhaps the students to give the story that they have put in order to one of another students, and then they perhaps can tell if it makes sense or not, or to ask questions about it. And then with the collaboration, they might get to a point where it's clearer. I can also go through, like from each team, go around the class and perhaps try to answer questions or to check really rapidly if their stories make sense. I can also perhaps choose some and ask the students for their strategies and what you can do in front of the class. Also, so there are many things that I can do as formative assessment. I will also consider differentiation, and this is for the approach to learning skill, but it is also for everything that I will teach in mathematics. So you see, it's just another row. So here, perhaps in differentiation is how will I help? Perhaps the content, perhaps the story will be shorter for students who I know have more difficulty reading because perhaps not their language, their mother tongue. So I can plan on that if I know that some students take more time because they have dyslexia, perhaps. So you see here, I can perhaps try to adapt my activity to the students. And then in the implicit activity, I will ask the students perhaps to do mathematics problems that involves many steps. Perhaps I can also, and then perhaps I can give them feedback on these steps, but perhaps I can also give them math problems which is already solved and with many, by mixing all the parts, and then I ask them what would be a proper structure to communicate their reasoning. So there are many possibilities. Once again, how will I assess that activity formatively, and what could I do as differentiation? So this is something which is asked for. So perhaps we'll have two rows on because I could have put the implicit activity like in another row. So we ask 3. And if I would go now, let's say in mathematics more specifically, if the question here, you see my question from the inquiry section, how can we represent a relationship between quantities? And here I added exponential. So how can we represent an exponential relationship between quantities? Perhaps I will give them data and I will ask the students to try to do it on their own before I get there. So it's all about inquiry. It's all about trying to use prior knowledge and also to be as authentic as I can be. So perhaps here what I will use is some real life data of something that the students could perhaps, a situation perhaps that they can try to build a table and then try to represent the relationship. It might be in many forms of representation. So I can give them like the wording of the situation, and then perhaps they will build a table, then a graph, so perhaps try to find the relationship, the general rule for the relationship. So there are many things that I can ask here as well. So once again, here there was no global context, but at some point, if you use all of your inquiry questions here, and that you are transferring these questions in the action section of the unit plan, then you will make sure that you are, at some point, will talk about your global context explorations. So this, from year to year, will probably get more and more detailed, because sometimes we do things and then we think after that and we say, well, what I just did is something which I didn't plan, or perhaps I planned but I didn't write, and then I just go and add it at the end of my unit or during the course of the unit. So this is for the second, learning engagement activity number 3. So once again, when you click on it, just a reminder that you were really good. Just click on reply, and then using the advanced button, you will have access to just drag and drop the file, or to choose a file. And the unit plan was available in module 3. Then the learning engagement 4, it's just a video, and it doesn't involve much in a category 1. It's just to watch a video and to share your comments. And of course, there are many resources on my IB if you would want more reading about it. And that's what we do normally. Let's say in category 2, we will give these resources. But for now, just having an overview. And here, the main things in module 4 were the questions, to understand that they will lead inquiry, and they will remind you when you plan to focus on your global context exploration, because it's teaching the concepts in context. Then the last learning engagement activity, MYP projects, it's just for you to use the project guide that that will apply in your school. But here, when you click on my post, I have attached it. This is on my IB, but I also have attached it here. So if you are doing the personal project at your school because you have MYP 5, for instance, then you can take a look at the guide, and then here, what is asked is just to post 3 to 5 new facts, things that you have found in your reading. So that will conclude actually the workshop. You will have here the conclusion that you can share. The idea is it's always nice at the end to think back on what you've learned and try to think what you will apply in your class. So I understand that perhaps at this point you'll say that you have many things, you will need time to plan, you'll need time to think, but it's only natural. So if you have any questions, once again, you can join me for questions in a virtual meeting, which is in 2 days actually, on Friday, or else you can write to me and I will answer it. So it was a pleasure. You were really involved all along, so that's great. And you have commented on the others' work many times, and you have shared many insightful resources, so it was great. So I thank you once again, and I will continue. The workshop ends on Tuesday, but of course in the days after that, in the few days after that, I will continue to comment your work until everyone is done. So I wish you a really good last week and to the pleasure to meet you someday. Bye-bye.